we have someone who has just vanished.
She never came back to retrieve her car.
And the next morning, she didn't show up for work.
We felt like this may not turn out to be an overdue hiker. Something might have happened to Meredith.
Witnesses had observed her with a strange man.
I thought I knew what evil was. He's pure evil.
You look into his eyes, you could tell that Satan was running his soul.
It was a perfect way to ring in the new year. 24-year-old Meredith Emerson and her beloved dog Ella would take a hike up Blood Mountain in Georgia. However, a walk in the woods would take a horrible turn. I'm Paul Holes, and this is Real Life Nightmare.
I think about this case every day. It just won't go away. We kind of go through our careers thinking, we're bulletproof. We're Teflon, these things don't get to us. And yet, it did. She was such a good person, and this didn't need to happen to her.
Meredith Emerson was a 24-year-old vivacious young woman. She came here to go to school at the University of Georgia, where she majored in French. She had lots of friends. She had a roommate, she had a boyfriend, and she had a black lab mix named Ella. And the picture that you see of her most often is her with the diploma from doggy training school with Ella. And she adored that dog.
Very outgoing, very intelligent, very strong, avid hiker. She was studying martial arts. She was very good at it.
She loved to get away and hike on the Appalachian Trail. Just a young woman that everybody loved and wanted to be around.
On January 1st, 2008, Meredith was supposed to hang out with her boyfriend, but they had had a phone conversation, and she felt that he was a little snippy, so instead of hanging with him, she and Ella headed up to Blood Mountain, which is an approach trail to the Appalachian Trail. It's very popular, and it's beautiful.
The Blood Mountain Approach Trail is probably one of the most recognized hiking destinations in Georgia and the Southeast. Meredith came to that parking lot and began to hike up the trail. And on January that day, it was probably mid to low 50s, bright sunshine. It was a good day to go hiking.
Meredith Emerson failed to come home that night. Nobody knew anything about it until her employer called her roommate the following day and said she didn't make it to work.
Her friend Julia, with whom she lived, did get concerned on January 2nd. Meredith and her dog were not there. Often the dog would wake up both of them in the mornings.
This isn't normal for Meredith. She always shows up for work. Nobody knew, none of her friends knew where she had gone. She left a note on a chalkboard in her apartment, going hiking with Ella, but she didn't say where.
When Meredith's friends were trying to decide what to do, they looked at a guide, a hiking guide that she had, where she had marked up some of her favorite trails, and one of them was Blood Mountain. So they went there, and it was the boyfriend that found her car parked at the trailhead. And it was covered with snow, because that night the temperatures dropped down to single digits, and it snowed.
Once he found the car, he ran up the mountain screaming and yelling for her. He called all their friends. They amassed a large number of people to come up there and start searching. He actually left a note on her car that said, "If you get back and you're here, please don't leave. We're looking for you."
When it was first reported that Meredith Emerson was missing, the law enforcement response was enormous.
We had helicopters, bloodhounds, cadaver dogs. People were volunteering to look for Meredith, and it was an intense search. At almost every turn, search teams would come back in and you could just see their faces and the disappointment that they were not able to find something. Late in the day on January 2nd, I get a call because of some things that were located on the trail, some water bottles, a dog leash, some dog treats, and a expandable police baton. Those items were found and turned in to law enforcement. But a police baton is unusual. That was the trigger that the local law enforcement called my office to get us to help.
This is an expandable baton. Law enforcement use this to try and gain control of incompliant suspects. Opened in that fashion and it expands out. You rarely ever see this outside of law enforcement.
It was part of my duty to meet with the family, to give them information that we were learning. They're horrified. We felt like this may not turn out to be an overdue hiker, that something might have happened to Meredith.
The first thing that we learned from her phone records, she apparently cut her phone off. So people trying to call her, going straight to voicemail, no contact. We actually had reached out to Meredith's bank, and whether it had been a computer malfunction or whatever, unbeknownst to us, her ATM card was used. It was used by somebody that was concealing their face, hiding their face, and putting in wrong PIN numbers.
You couldn't really see who it was. The image was not sharp, but you could tell that someone was using the ATM, and it was kind of creepy.
Her ATM card had actually been used on 2 separate occasions. One time in Blairsville, Georgia, which is just up the road from Blood Mountain. A second time in Gainesville, Georgia, south of Blood Mountain.
All these were attempts. No money was gained, so he didn't get a dime.
She's strong-willed, she's smart, and from what everybody's gathered is she knows these trails really well.
Julia Karenbauer was her roommate. One thing that she did, she notified a lot of media.
We immediately started getting calls into the tip line. Very important calls from people who had seen Meredith on the trail January 1st, but had also seen somebody with her that seemed like was following her and trying to engage her in conversation.
All the descriptions matched. White male, weathered, toothless, and had a dog potentially named Danny, and drove a white van. The thing that stuck out in my mind is that he had a nice backpack, had a good-looking dog, but he had duct tape on his shoes.
They said they couldn't put their finger on what was wrong, but it just didn't feel right.
We were actually able to talk to the gentleman who had found the baton. He said it looked like she was trying to get away from him. She was hiking faster than he was.
He remembered noticing an area in one of the switchbacks on the trail where the ground had been disturbed. When he saw that area and then found the water bottles and the leash and the baton, he thought that a struggle might have happened there.
In Georgia, they're stepping up the search now for a missing hiker. Police say they're looking for a man in his 60s who was seen talking to her on a trail.
Everybody was broadcasting a description of this person, and within minutes they got a call from a man who once employed him. He said, "I know who this is."
I said, "Oh my God, this must be Gary Hilton."
Tonight, the search for a missing female hiker in the North Georgia mountains and a person of interest.
We began to get several phone calls to the tip line describing the man they saw walking with Meredith and trying to engage her in conversation.
White male, weathered, toothless, had a dog, drove a white van.
Very quickly, we got a call from someone who essentially said, "I know who you're looking for."
I heard the description. I heard the location, Blood Mountain, which I knew was a frequent place that he visited. I put all that together and my heart just sunk to my stomach. I said, "Oh my God, this must be Gary Hilton."
John Tabor said that he knew exactly who we were talking about. He says that he used to work for him as a telemarketer. He knew that he carried a police-style baton. He said that his dog's not named Danny, it's Dandy. And that's why he knew that it was actually Gary Michael Hilton.
Tabor said that he was a survivalist, he was a hiker, and he lived in the forest in his van.
He had said that Hilton liked to frequent national parks. He knows that he drives a white van because he bought it for him. He actually provided us with the tag number for the van. At that point, we were able to pull a driver's license photo of Gary Michael Hilton.
Within minutes, they had a photograph of him, and it was blasted everywhere.
We now have a name and a picture.
They are looking for Gary Michael Hilton. He's 61 years old.
One of the most unsettling details Tabor relayed to the GBI was the reason that Gary Michael Hilton was toothless is because he used a pair of pliers to pull out his own teeth.
Because he felt like it made him look scarier. People wouldn't mess with him. All he'd have to do is grin real big with some sharp plucked teeth and people would leave him alone.
There came a time where Hilton called Tabor. This was before everything started with Meredith Emerson, and demanded an enormous amount of money.
He threatened to kill me if I didn't give him $10,000. He said he didn't care how I got it, but that he wanted it.
Which only confirmed for Tabor that this guy was unstable and dangerous.
Whenever we found that out, the notion that this was an overdue hiker was dashed pretty quickly. We began to find out more and more about Hilton. He had not had a lot of contact with law enforcement in the past, and the contact he had was minor stuff.
A lot of the crimes that he was charged with were misdemeanors. Possession of marijuana. He set fire to something. You know, petty crimes.
He had contacts with some of the Forest Service rangers in the forest.
What you doing out here? Well, you're the fourth person that's come along. Am I? And asked me that. I guess they called you, didn't they?
We talked with them, and they described his behavior as being extremely bizarre, sometimes confrontational, because he was always camping in places that he was not authorized to camp, and they were moving him along.
I'm leaving. I'm getting out of here. God almighty.
Probably a couple hours after Tabor called the GBI, Hilton called John Tabor looking for money.
We traced the telephone call to the Huddle House in Marble Hill, Georgia, west of Blood Mountain. Within minutes, agents descended on the Huddle House, and there was no sign of it. On January 4th, we did get a call that a black lab, believed to be Ella, Meredith's dog, had wandered into the Kroger grocery store in Cumming, Georgia, which is about 40 miles south of Blood Mountain. Immediately, agents are dispatched to that location.
We were able to get the dog and take it to a veterinarian. We knew Ella had an ID chip in her, and we were able to positively identify that dog as being Ella.
There was hope that maybe since Ella was found, that Meredith would be found alive as well.
We are thankful that Ella has been found, but Meredith is still out there. I appeal to everyone to search their hearts and memories for anything they can remember and do to help us find Meredith.
And then Friday afternoon, we get a call from a lady who says, I just got a call from Gary Hilton. I've known him for a while, haven't seen him in years, but he just called me, and he wanted money. She said, don't you know the world's looking for you? And he hung up. She called the tip line, obviously, and gave us the phone number that she had seen on her caller ID.
And it is actually a payphone that is located at a Quick Trip right in front of the Kroger grocery store where Ella is found. So immediately we were dispatching agents to that location as well, and he is nowhere to be found.
Since he appeared to be moving south, we alerted Metro Atlanta law enforcement to be on the lookout for a white van in Gary Hilton. In the meantime, we began a search of the gas station parking lot and found a dumpster in the back of the lot. And in the dumpster, we found what we hoped we wouldn't find.
Breaking news tonight. A 24-year-old woman hikes the North Georgia mountains only to vanish into thin air.
They were looking for this scraggly, toothless man who was seen hiking with her on the trail.
Agents received a phone call from an individual who said, hey, I just got off the phone with him. He called asking for money. We got the phone number, and it is actually a payphone located at a Quick Trip right in front of the Kroger grocery store where Ella is found.
We began a search of the gas station parking lot and found a dumpster. And in the dumpster, we found what we hoped we wouldn't find. We found personal belongings of Meredith, bloody clothing, her driver's license, men's boots with blood on them.
Everything that she had with her when she had gone up to Blood Mountain was in this dumpster.
The blood was so heavy that I knew this was not going to work out like we had hoped. While we're processing that scene, a person in Metro Atlanta, a citizen, calls 911 and says, I think I'm looking at the man y'all are looking for.
The cab 911, what's the exact location?
I have the person of interest in that missing woman case is at this Chevron gas station on Ashford Dunwoody. The van is here, the dog is here, the red dog, and I saw the man's face, and I've been watching the news, and I know it's him. I know it's him. He's making multiple trips back to his van and getting out and taking it to a dumpster. I can go take him down if you want.
No, sir. Stay right there.
Okay.
At that time, we're sending the world.
Oh, I'm just shaking. Is there somebody en route?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because he looks like he's finishing up. Here comes the cops. Yes. Yes.
Police are there?
Yes. Yes. They got him.
And it was while he was trying to wash the blood out of his white Astro van that they finally caught him.
One of the first things I asked the officers who took him into custody is she with him? It's a gut punch when they say no, he's by himself.
Once we found and arrested Gary Hilton, they took him to our headquarters office, and he was very uncooperative. He didn't even want to sit up. He didn't even want to walk in.
When I walked in, he was laying on the floor, sprawled out, basically just laying there staring into space. I immediately noticed he had a pretty pronounced fingernail mark into his nose. His hand was swollen. He had some other defensive wounds on his neck, like claw marks. I was trying anything to get a response from him.
The only thing he told us was his Miranda warnings. And then he said that he didn't want to talk to us at all after that.
Tonight, at around 8 o'clock this evening, Gary Michael Hilton was located. Hope that he's talking and they're getting good information from him.
Your hopes for Meredith at this hour?
Of course, unharmed. That she walks into that same damn Kroger that her dog did. That's what I want.
That night, we worked well into early morning hours of Saturday processing the scene. And we recovered a camera and a tape recorder that Hilton had apparently home videos that he had made of himself.
Look, I'm taking a picture what I'm come for immortality right here. Good.
The videos he shot of himself were so bizarre.
He photographed himself with his dog, Dandy. They showed him flexing and mugging for the camera.
I've gained 20 pounds in 3 months, 3 or 4 months. 171 pounds.
He was very much a narcissist. He made a lot of videos of himself.
We got to document it. He's a my boy. He's a my baby.
Then they showed him in confrontations because he was on private property or he shouldn't have been where he was.
You're the lawman, you are the law. I'm going to check it out, and if it ain't the law and you're wrong,
You come talk to me.
I'm not talking to nobody. I'm filing and I'm suing.
There was one of him arguing with a Papa John's pizza delivery guy.
You tell these guys to quit terror driving. You tell them not to drive more than 5 miles an hour above the limit.
We brought his van back to my office and searched it. We found several hundred pieces of evidence in the van because he's living in it. High-end camping gear, tents and sleeping bags. We also found blood evidence on several things in the van. But But we continued on because we had Gary Hilton, but we didn't have Meredith.
Within the last 15 minutes, a Superior Court judge in Union County has signed a warrant charging Gary Hilton with kidnapping with bodily harm.
So you don't believe she's still alive?
It does not look favorable for that to be the case.
The family really wanted to recover her body because it was believed, although not known for sure, that she was actually dead at that time.
Later that Saturday, I said, we got to get this man a lawyer because we can't talk to him. The only way we can communicate to him is through his lawyer. And we don't have Meredith yet. So Sunday morning, he was appointed a lawyer. And I told his lawyers, I said, here's everything that we know and have.
Who knows what prompted Hilton to cooperate, but he did. And the deal was that if Hilton told them where they could find Meredith, they would take the death penalty off the table.
We agreed that it was the right thing to do. The family needed closure. The next afternoon, the prosecutor calls me and says, okay, he's ready to talk to you and tell you where Meredith is.
Authorities arrest Gary Hilton in the disappearance of Meredith Emerson. They found bloody evidence in his van and in a dumpster, and were about to find where he had been keeping Meredith.
We actually made a deal with Hilton to take the death penalty off the table if he would take us to her body.
So me and the case agent traveled up to the jail, got him out, and he told us where she was.
What we'd like to do is let you now tell us where the body is and try to direct us to it the best you can.
Okay, I'll be glad to.
All right. He drew a map or tried to draw a map where we would find the remains. She was in an area south of Blood Mountain in what's called the Dawson Forest Wildlife Management Area.
It's a very rural area, very wooded, nothing but dirt roads run through it.
You would go down that road about 50 yards, and it's going to be off the south side or the left side of the road the body will be.
Okay. Gary Hilton was familiar with this forest. He had been there before, he had camped there before. When he was describing where we would find her, he was very specific.
The body will be approximately 40 yards or 120 feet off of that. South of that is covered by leaves and brush, but not buried.
Okay. Is it wrapped in anything?
No, it isn't.
Is it clothed?
No, it isn't.
Is it intact?
No, it isn't.
Okay.
I'll
tell
you.
Us more about that?
Okay. Yes, the head will be missing.
He had killed her and decapitated her and taken her head to another location and had hidden it.
Where's the head?
The only reason, by the way, the head was removed was forensically.
Yeah, right.
In other words, the hair is full of fibers.
Sure.
He thought that by dismembering her the way he did, that it would be harder to identify her.
And the only reason the body is nude is forensics. Okay, for forensics. See, I didn't even know I was associated with this disappearance at that time.
Right.
You see, I didn't find that out till later on the day. I stopped at a gas station and I am on the front page.
He was just very matter of fact and very nonchalant. Just evil.
Where would the head be?
It's going to be a little hard to find. You're going to need a dog for this, I believe.
Can you help us?
Well, I'll help you.
It was not likely that we could find both scenes without him. So we decided to load him up and take him with us.
I apologize to both of you guys. I mean, you know, it's been trying for you. I'm sure these cases are emotionally wrenching for you. Yeah. But that's your damn job, so.
Before he arrived on site, we were able to find Meredith's torso. But there was no way. I didn't feel like we could find her head without him.
He had taken the head and transported it about a quarter mile to a half mile away at another location.
And so we drove him up to an area where he told us to stop. We got him out of the van, and he and I began to walk down this small little woods road in the dark. He was chained, had leg irons on. He was walking next to me as if he knew exactly where he was going. And all of a sudden he stopped and turned and pointed to a bank and told me there would be a log on the ground. And on one end of the log there would be more clothing, and on the other end would be Meredith. And we were able to find her that way.
I went down to the location where the body was. Just the, I guess, weight of it all just floods in. I just fell down to my knees and started crying. I'd never had that reaction in an investigation. It was pretty tough.
I never wanted to kill somebody as much as I wanted to that night. An autopsy was performed the next day, and we learned that Meredith died of blunt force trauma to the head, and that she was decapitated post-mortem.
I saw the crime scene photos. Those pictures are burned in my brain. It's horrific that this beautiful, vivacious 24-year-old was subjected to this kind of treatment.
When we took Hilton down to Dawson Forest that night, he began to tell us about the final moments of Meredith's life and what he had done to her.
I thought I knew what evil was. He's pure evil.
"61-year-old Gary Hilton made a deal to lead police to the body of Meredith Emerson.
At approximately 7:30 this evening, the body of Meredith Emerson was discovered in a wooded area. When we took Hilton down to Dawson Forest that night, he began to talk about the final moments of Meredith's life and what he had done to her.
I'm going to tell you right now, there was never any plan to let her go.
Okay.
I knew that if I let her go, I would be instantly ID'd.
I'm asking how we got to this point. Why Meredith? Why did you target her? Well, she's a single girl. She's not hiking with somebody. I should be able to control her physically.
I knew it would be easier to establish control over a female, any female, than it would a male.
How did you strike up a conversation with her or whatever?
Dogs, you know, people that have dogs, dogs are going to mate.
So he approaches her. He tries to keep a conversation going with her, and she basically just walks off and leaves him. So he conceals himself on the way back down the trail, that he knows that she'll have to be coming back down. That's where he plans to attack her.
What did you produce?
A knife, bayonet. The bayonet is probably still up there. I lost control of both. She fought. And as I read in the paper, she's a martial artist.
He talks about the fact that all he's wanting is money. He pulls out a knife, tells her, "Look, I'm not going to hurt you. I just want you to move down to your car, give me your card, give me your PIN number, and you can be on your way." She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the knife by the blade and started fighting him. It shocked Hilton.
I think it was you, probably. One of the GBIs said that little 120-pound girl about probably close to whip your ass. Well, she about did.
Meredith was a strong young woman with some martial arts training, so he did not have an easy time with her.
I had to hand fight her, and I still couldn't get control of her. She would feign or pretend that I was in control and then start fighting again.
After he was able to get her under his control and put Meredith in the back of his van, he drove around various locations in North Georgia trying to use ATMs while trying to disguise himself from being seen on the camera with PIN numbers that he had asked her for that were apparently false.
Hilton later told us that she was just making up PIN numbers and how upset that made him.
4 or 5 times she kept trying to convince you that it would work.
She did convince me. Right. She ran me back. I'd come, I'd go, try like an idiot.
There was evidence in the van that he was assaulting her to try and get the correct PIN number off of her, even to the point of sexually assaulting her. I picture in her mind, if I keep giving the wrong PIN number, any second now, the cops are gonna come save me. And it's the biggest failure of my career that I did, in my opinion.
During her kidnapping, Gary Hilton had basically cleared out the back of the van, but he also had chains that he used to actually padlock her to the seats in the back of the van. And Meredith Emerson was not even able, as far as we can tell, to be able to see out of the van. It had to be just a horrifying circumstance for her.
On the afternoon he killed Meredith, he took her down into the woods and tied her to a tree and told her that he was going to let her go in a few minutes. He leaves there and walks back up to his van, his campsite. He told us he got a cup of coffee and a tire iron and went back to Meredith, and he said that Meredith had said, "I thought you weren't coming back." In other words, "I thought you were going to leave me here tied to this tree." He said that it seemed like she was relieved that he had come back.
She thought she was going home, but she wasn't.
I gave her a book to read and everything else there, and I walked up and made as if to unsecure the chain, struck her with the bar.
What bar?
It was a jack handle, just a straight jack handle.
And then he killed her. He hit her multiple times with a tire tool in the head. Each one would have been fatal.
She was still clothed at this time. Eventually her body was found nude and decapitated.
I just wanted to expose everything to the elements, rather than keep them bagged. I poured liquid bleach all over her to any DNA, and I knew bleach would not destroy fibers, but that any DNA she may have picked up from my clothes. She'd been wearing my clothes for now, 3 days.
He is talking to me as if I should be impressed with him. Was this difficult for you at all? As far as take her life, was it difficult at all?
It was like an out-of-body experience.
Okay.
It was surrealistic. Of course it's surrealistic. Removing her head is just unreal.
Right.
Unreal.
Gary Hilton on the morning of January 31st was indicted in Superior Court. And then at right after lunch, he pled guilty and was sentenced.
Do you now want to enter a plea of guilty?
Yes, Your Honor.
And how do you plead to the charge of the murder of Meredith Hope Emerson?
Guilty, Your Honor.
Toward the end of the proceeding, the judge asked the Emersons if they wanted to make a statement, and they both did. You could have heard a pin drop in the courtroom.
Meredith was our shining light in our lives. And now we are left with a hole in our hearts that will not heal.
I believe he is nothing more than a bully and a weak-minded coward who preys on others. He fancies himself a survivalist, while anyone can see he's a scared little man on the run. He's the fool who goes through life too ignorant to realize he is a fool, and Meredith has exposed him.
Almost nobody can have closure that's real in this situation. But what they did have was a measure of justice in a very quick time, because we had him then, and he was going to pay.
I sentence you to spend the remainder of your natural life in prison. It is the intention of the court that you never receive parole.
During this investigation, I got phone calls from several different states because they had missing hikers in their forest.
Basically said, hey, that's very similar to some cases that we're looking at. It turned out that some of the things started shaping up.
We began to get information from out of North Carolina and Tennessee, and then Florida. I remember thinking, what is going on? Who do we have here?
We realized that what has happened to Meredith Emerson is probably part of a possible serial killer.
tonight there is growing suspicion that police in Georgia may have a serial killer in custody.
During this investigation, I got phone calls from several different states because they had missing hikers in their forest. And that's when I figured out that Gary Hilton's a serial killer. There's no telling how many other victims there are.
Once he had told us where Meredith's body was, I asked, this isn't the first time this has happened, is it? He looked at me for a second and almost answered me, but he looked back at his attorney, and his attorney said, no, we're just talking about this case in particular. I honestly believe he was getting close to answering me, but the attorney stopped him.
By the way, you can tell John Taylor that I'm the one that killed the girl, okay? I'm the one that killed her. When I called him, that girl was alive.
There was over a 4-hour interview with Gary Hilton after our case was concluded. The purpose of the interview was to see if he would slip up and talk about other victims. And he did in a certain way.
Listen, the reason for killing the girl, it was either once you've taken someone, you're either going to kill them or you're going to get caught. It's as simple as that. In my situation, look at me. I got the dog, I got the van. I'm me. I'm famous anyway, regardless. And I knew it. I didn't kill them because for any satisfaction. It was distasteful. It was dreadful. Trust me.
He referred to those other people in that way that would certainly lead anybody to believe that there are more victims. He really treated the whole aspect of murder as just another day. He even said he admitted he made mistakes.
When you're going out to kill somebody, if you're seen by a single other person on the trail, then that day's screwed. And so you get down to the point where, well, like Meredith, I had $40 money and several days food. I was going to have to kill somebody in that period of time. Okay? And when you get down to the bitter end, you ignore all the rules you set, which I did, which got me caught.
This is me in the corner right here. This is Hilton. The pure evil of the way his mind works. It's just like, how can this person exist? How can this be a living, breathing thing here on this earth?
Wasn't it you that asked me what's it like to cut someone's head off? Mm-hmm. Okay. It was dreadful, and the only thing you can do is so dreadful that the only thing you can do is go unhonorable. I told you it wasn't real. Right. Okay.
On the day before the kidnapping of Meredith Emerson, Gary Hilton was in fact seen on the Appalachian Trail, and he had approached another woman, but when he noticed that she was with other people, he broke off from her. He was apparently searching for someone to be able to take under his control.
Blood Mountain is a good place to hunt because it's the most used day hiking trail in the state of Georgia. But it's a bad place to hunt in that you
because they have a lot of people.
So the way you would do it,
witnesses.
So the way you would do it would be to lurk in a blind, so to speak, off the trail, observe with binoculars, and lurk.
My name's Rob McNeil. I was Gary Hilton's attorney in the Meredith Emerson murder case. As a defense attorney, very rarely do you get a client that tells you the story, the facts, just 100%. You know, but with Gary, it wasn't like that at all. This is a matter of fact. This is what happened. This is why I did it. A lot was just shocking. You just could not stop listening. I remember he said one thing that just totally blew my mind was, he said, in hindsight, I'd been better off just robbing banks. What do you think?
In retrospect, I regret not attempting a bank robbery. I really do. Because all of this got me nowhere but caught.
Once we got to collaborating with Florida Department of Law Enforcement, we learned that they had a missing victim.
Cheryl Dunlop, a nurse and Sunday school teacher, had disappeared.
She was the kindest person.
Cheryl's body, she was headless, handless.
We realized that was probably going to be a serial killer type situation.
Welcome back to Real Life Nightmare. I'm Paul Holes. 61-year-old Gary Hilton kidnaps and kills a young college graduate, Meredith Emerson, as she hikes Blood Mountain in Georgia. But just 1 month earlier, a mom went missing in a Florida national park. The similarities were chilling.
In late December 2007, Cheryl Dunlap, a nurse and Sunday school teacher in Tallahassee, Florida, went for a day hike in the Apalachicola National Forest. And she didn't come home.
My name is Gloria Tucker. Cheryl Dunlap was my cousin. When Sherry had time to kill, if she was between calls or anything, she would sometimes go to Leon Sinks and she would sit and she would read and read for hours.
They've created a venue there where there are hiking trails, there are benches in the shades, and you can go and relax and bird watch. It's a great asset to our community.
Sherry was a mom of 2 boys. She was very proud of them. She had 2 granddaughters, and she was extra proud of them. Sherry was an RN, a registered nurse. Her life's mission was to help people.
She was a member of the River of Life Church. She was a Sunday school teacher. She has done missionary trips to China, to Haiti, to Mexico. She was just a wonderful person. On Saturday morning, December 1st, 2007, Cheryl Dunlap made some phone calls to a couple of friends. She had also indicated she would probably go to Leon Sinks to do some reading.
She was seen reading a book there on a park bench by a couple that was taking a hike in the area, and then later that afternoon she failed to show up for a dinner date.
As that event unfolds, she does not show up for church on Sunday morning. Some of her friends from Sunday school tried to reach out to her and get a hold of her, and they couldn't reach her on the phone, but it wasn't anything setting off alarms. Cheryl was a nurse at the Florida State Thagard Health Center here on campus at Florida State University in Tallahassee. So on Monday, she did not show up for work.
It was as if Ms. Dunlap had just disappeared into thin air.
Some friends went to her house as a result of that and found her dog there, and her car was gone, so they were very concerned.
We were in total bewilderment of what was going on. What do you mean you can't find her? Where is she? She would never leave and not tell someone.
Subsequent to that, her car had been discovered on the highway right outside of Leon Sinks, beside the road with a flat tire. The Florida Highway Patrol had stopped and checked it. They ran the tag, but there was no alerts out because Cheryl was not reported missing. So it was merely a car with a flat tire, and they left. So when they called the sheriff's office to report her missing, they went back to the Sinks and they found her car.
The car was not locked. Sherry would never leave her car unlocked.
Her purse and her keys were in the car. The first thing we looked at was the flat tire. It was very obvious that something had intentionally been shoved into the sidewall of that car to flatten that tire. We knew immediately something was drastically wrong. In the meantime, they did a check on Cheryl's bank records. And as it turns out, her ATM card had been used at the same location 3 times in a period of 2.5 days. We went to the bank. They provided us a video of a man that looked like he had just taken gauze and wrapped around his head and used her ATM. I say a man, a person. We couldn't even tell. We were pretty sure it was a man. We got all the exterior footage of vehicles coming and going at the bank. I mean, we were tracking people down and interviewing people, and none of those things panned out. It was just a total mystery. The problem that Cheryl presented for us was she led a pretty wholesome life. She really didn't present a lot of opportunity for us to develop suspects in her world because there weren't any. On December 15th, 2007, the Leon County Sheriff's Office received a call from a group of hunters in the Apalachicola National Forest.
Some hunters observed some buzzards gathering around some mangrove, thick vegetation. Upon closer inspection, the hunters discovered that there was a human torso there.
It was immediately apparent to us it was a female corpse. It was headless and handless. It was nude. The body was covered in palm fronds, is what we call them. Not to the point you couldn't see it. It was just covered up to disguise it as best could. This was clearly a homicide. The efforts were to prevent identification of who this person was. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement verified that it was, in fact, Cheryl Dunlap's body.
To think about what it would take to dismember a human body, I mean, you have to really be sick to accomplish that.
Once we discovered Cheryl's body, we were following up on leads and we had some tips, but we still had no real suspect. In the first part of January 2008, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was working a homicide that involved an abduction of a young lady.
In Georgia, the body of missing hiker Meredith Emerson has been found. Police say 61-year-old Gary Hilton led them to her body.
It kind of blew up because it was a huge thing in Blood Mountain, Georgia, where this happened to Meredith.
These cases were so much alike. I thought, oh my goodness, was it possible that it wasn't the same person?
We began to notice the similarities between the Georgia case and the Tallahassee case. We had a hiker alone in a national forest, seems to have vanished and been abducted.
The similarities were, they were virtually identical. People in our community started to see these newscasts and see photographs of Gary Hilton and his dog. That resulted in an onslaught of tips and sightings. And as it turns out, Gary had been in our community for some time. As those tips started to come in, we would discover campsites in places where Gary Hilton had camped. We would go to each and every one of those sites. We were finding consistent items up to and including the name brand of the dog food that he fed his dog. And so we had a tip from a gentleman that he had run into an older man in the woods, fit Gary Hilton's description to a T. So we go to that campsite and we found what had been covered up with straw and hidden fairly well was a small burn pit. And it had ashes and debris, and ultimately they turned out to be identified as bone fragments from fingers and a skull.
The head and hands were incinerated to such a degree that we were not able to conduct DNA testing to actually match the head and hands remains with the torso.
But we're very confident that this is not a coincidence. We're very confident that those tied directly back to Cheryl.
The condition that the body was left in suggested that there could have been some type of trauma to the head, but the head and hands were so badly burned that we were not able to determine a cause of death for Ms. Dunlap.
Decapitating a person and cutting their hands off, it just tells me that this guy's mental capacity is beyond what I can describe, other than just savage and psychopathic. Probably the big turning point for us that we knew that we were onto the person that committed this hideous crime was when our criminal analysts ran Gary Hilton's name in a database, and it turns out Gary Hilton had an encounter with a law enforcement officer in the Apalachicola National Forest that would put him in our community in and around the time that Cheryl Dunlap's disappearance occurred. It was all beyond coincidence at that juncture. We knew Gary Michael Hilton was responsible for this. What he did to Meredith Emerson, he did to Cheryl Dunlap.
Cheryl Dunlap went for a day hike in the Apalachicola National Forest. She didn't come home. A couple of weeks later, some hunters saw some buzzards circling. They went to the area and located the remains of Cheryl Dunlap. She had been decapitated, her hands had been cut off and set on fire.
It was just a total mystery. Up until Gary Michael Hilton got on our radar as a suspect.
That man is the most evil thing. It's mind-boggling that someone could hurt such a kind, loving individual.
Gary Michael Hilton was arrested in Georgia on the case related to Meredith Emerson. And he had with him a van with mountains of evidence in it. We found Cheryl Dunlap's DNA on a pair of boots, hiking boots, that Mr. Hilton was attempting to discard at the time he was apprehended in Georgia. We were aware that in Meredith Emerson's case, she was held captive for a period of days, chained up in this guy's van, and sexually assaulted. I think the evidence suggests that that is the same thing that happened to Cheryl Dunlap. We were able to find some DNA on her thigh area that was a match to Mr. Hilton.
Gary Michael Hilton had tried to rape her at least 2 times. The mitigator for the defense told me what had happened. And then what he did was he promised her that if she would go down and tie herself to the tree, then he would think about letting her go. And what he did was when she turned around and walked towards the tree, he shot her in the head and killed her. He couldn't face her.
In both the murder of Meredith Emerson and the murder of Cheryl Dunlap, we had a financial motive. In our case, Ms. Dunlap had apparently given up her PIN because the suspect was able to successfully withdraw money from Ms. Dunlap's account.
We compared the photographs of those ATMs to the ones that we had developed in Georgia, and it was obviously the same person, no doubt.
Gary Michael Hilton confiscated $700 out of Sherry's account, but $700 compared to Sherry's life, that's nothing.
A bayonet was found in connection with the Meredith Emerson case on Blood Mountain. That bayonet was significant to my case because the toolmark examiner that looked at Cheryl Dunlap's tire that had been punctured was able to say this is the actual tool that was used to puncture Cheryl Dunlap's tire.
Police are now looking into whether Hilton may be linked to other hiking murder cases in North Carolina.
We had a meeting this afternoon with investigators and prosecutors from North Carolina regarding a double homicide.
Well, before Cheryl Dunlap, in North Carolina, an elderly couple, John and Irene Bryant, had gone hiking in a national forest in Transylvania County. And they did this all the time. But their children lived in other places, their adult children, and one of them noticed, hadn't heard from Mom and Dad.
John and Irene Bryant were married for 58 years after meeting each other on a blind date. They had 4 children and 11 grandchildren. The pair loved the outdoors, and in their retirement, they hiked almost weekly. Sadly, their last hike would result in an unthinkable tragedy.
They found Irene Bryant near her car, near this national forest.
She had been killed by blunt force trauma to the head. Mr. Bryant was not at the scene.
John Bryant was found in February after he and his wife had disappeared in October.
John Bryant's body was recovered in the Nantahala National Forest.
He was shot. They connected them also to Hilton because someone had used their ATM card and withdrawn $300 from their bank account.
Both the build, the mannerisms, everything was clearly matching up to Gary Hilton. Actually, the first DNA sample that we removed from the van wound up being Mr. Bryant's DNA.
He had a method of operation, an MO, and it was to find people who he perceived as weak, who might be a money bank for him.
You know, it could have been any of us. I'm a father of 2 daughters and a husband, and can't imagine. And that ain't fake, I apologize.
He doesn't just kill them, he mutilates their body.
Cheryl Dunlap, like Meredith Emerson, he dismembered her. He thought that that would make it harder for police to collect evidence that would connect him to them.
He can say he's trying to be careful all he wants, but he just liked it.
Gary Hilton may not be regarded as highly as Ted Bundy was in terms of being a serial killer, but he's certainly on the same level.
Ted Bundy, he had all kind of props. Crutches one day, arm in a cast the next. Gary Hilton's prop was his dog.
He's my boy. He's my baby.
He used Dandy as his approach mechanism kind of an icebreaker with Meredith to gain confidence. And I'm sure that he did that with all his victims.
Come for immortality right here. Good. The camera's right there.
Hilton could turn on the charm when he wanted to be. He'd get stopped by a ranger and he'd, chat him up and act like a guy that was just living his life in his van.
What you doing out here? Well, you're the fourth person to come along. Am I? I'm leaving. I'm getting out of here. God almighty.
He jokes around. He's acting very bizarre, but he doesn't present in some of those situations, I'm crazy dangerous. Maybe just crazy, but maybe not both.
Hey, I love you. Mr. Hilton, you take care.
His IQ is extremely high, so he's able to communicate very well.
Lawyers and everyone else ask me constantly, how come you're so seemingly intelligent? The reason I'm so seemingly intelligent is that I, alone amongst almost anyone, including you dudes, have time to actually stop and think about things.
During this investigation, I talked to a lawyer, and he told me about a movie that the lawyer, had participated in making.
I'm a hunter, Barbara. Where's the challenge?
And he said Gary Hilton had consulted on that movie.
The movie was that we would take women, bring them over to the mountains, and then hunt them down like prey.
I was thinking, that's kind of like what he did now. Gary Hilton told us that he would have continued to kill people had we not caught him. And there's no doubt that he would have.
I'm Samuel Rail, and I was Gary's attorney for a number of cases, and then also his close acquaintance. Actually, Gary was my very first client. He was there as a small-time crook doing charitable work, except there's no charity. It's for Gary.
He was a scam artist. He would call people on the phone, tell them that he's with the JCs or he's with the Shriners and he's putting on a circus for the kids, and would their company like to contribute? He'd go by and pick up the check and cash it, and that's how he made his living until, he got arrested for it a few times.
That's right! Run, little bunny! Let him run away!
The 1995 movie Deadly Run went straight to video. It portrays a serial killer who preyed on women he set loose in the woods. The plot, the film's producer claims, came from this man, Gary Michael Hilton.
I did this movie, Deadly Run, but I think for Gary, apparently it turned out to be a trial run. The movie was that we would take women as beautiful as we could find them, and then bring them over to the mountains, and then hunt them down like prey. That's what got him so excited to be part of this whole movie.
Meeting me can be dangerous to your health.
I think Nancy's been abducted and she's most probably dead. I think the guy that did it to her has done it before to a whole lot of other women.
The idea was that it would be a shock for the police to realize that they were dealing with a serial killer. Gary thought that would be a very good idea.
He actually picked the spot, the location for the movie at this secluded cabin.
He did. He knows North Georgia like the back of his hand. He looked around and found really what was a perfect place, just a little cabin out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know how anybody finds it. He knew how.
The cabin was located near Cleveland, Georgia. 30 miles to the southwest, the mutilated body of Meredith Emerson was discovered.
It seems pretty unbelievable. Somebody who helped produce a movie about a serial killer turns out to be a serial killer.
Bizarre, right? How did someone who I knew and knew so well all of a sudden turn out to be such a person? At the time I knew him, anybody would want to meet him and be around him. He was very gracious, paid close attention to his body. He always worked out. He was always up there in the mountains. He was always outdoorsy. I'm surprised that it'd be a serial killer, But I'm not surprised because he didn't have a screw loose. He had several screw looses. He was a fellow with a lot of problems, which is why I really wanted to help him out.
Growing up, Gary Hilton, his mother divorced his father, and there was an instant when Gary was 14 years old, and he thought that his stepdad was mistreating his mother. So Gary was able to get from a friend a handgun one day when he was arguing with his stepfather. He threatened to shoot him, and Gary did.
He didn't kill him, but he shot his stepfather when he was 14.
He was charged with a juvenile offense then because he was so young. Later on, he joined the military, was stationed in Germany for a while at a base that he said handled nuclear weapons. He had been discharged because he was thought to be becoming schizophrenic.
He would use that kind of language, military language, when he would talk about when he would go to the mountains, call them operations. And he would say he was hunting people.
Blood Mountain is a good place to hunt because it's the most used day hiking trail in the state of Georgia.
He married 3 times. He actually, during one of those marriages, bought a home. Then, all of a sudden, he's homeless, lives in a van in the forest.
His criminal history was just a lot of run-ins with law enforcement.
He'd get arrested and charged with possession of drugs, or he was trespassing. He had dozens and dozens of those experiences, but none really serious enough to send him to prison for a long time. That's what made law enforcement wonder if he had other murders in his history, because how do you go from drug crimes or trespassing to serial killing? You don't. That's a big jump.
At the time that we arrested Gary Hilton, he was 61 years old. It's hard to believe that somebody 61 just woke up one morning and says, I'm going to go kill people like this. It's unlikely that there are no other victims.
I am 99.9% sure that Gary Hilton has committed more than the 4 murders that we can prove.
To this day, they're still looking to see if he might have done more. Rosanna Milani was one of the names that came up.
There were just so many similarities that the question is, was it Gary Hilton or who was it?
Authorities were able to connect 4 murders to Gary Hilton. Yet another case with strange similarities emerges. A young woman had mysteriously disappeared from a small North Carolina mountain town. Authorities were now wondering if she also fell victim to this serial killer.
My name is Luz Miliani. I'm the mother of Rosanna Miliani. My daughter was a very, very energetic girl. I call her my earthquake because the moment she arrived, you knew that she was here.
I'm the father of Rosanna Miliani. Rosanna was very artistic. She was creative.
She travels a lot. She loves to go different places.
On December 7, 2005, Rosanna Miliani traveled to Bryson City, North Carolina. In the afternoon of that same day, Rosanna vanished into thin air.
No one's seen or heard from her since then. It is a true mystery. Bryson City, North Carolina is a small town. It's at the doorway to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Fresh air, clean water, and nice people.
At the time of Rosanna's disappearance, she was 29 years of age. There is no doubt in my mind that there is someone who took Rosanna. Rosanna had a target on her back. When you take a young female who is walking around a downtown area and pulling luggage, that is an indicator to a person who might have criminal intentions. And was it Gary Hilton or was it someone else?
The last time Rosianna spoke with her father was on December 7th at 7:41 a.m. when she made the phone call from her room at the Ramada Inn in Cherokee, which is now the Cherokee Grand Lodge.
She greeted me, hello, Daddy. I'm in North Carolina. Why are you doing that? Well, this is beautiful here. I wanted to come here. I'll be home soon. I will keep in touch.
Her father reached out to law enforcement because they were always in contact, and then she just dropped off the face of the earth.
We immediately launched an investigation trying to find out and trace Rosanna's last movements. We found that she was in downtown Bryson City shopping. Some of the places that she went to was a local hair salon. At that time, she made statements that she was there to go hiking.
Rosianna did not have her own vehicle while she was here. She put some of her stuff in storage. The storage unit that Rosianna had been prepaid for a month. We believe that she had full intentions of staying here for that month.
Also, we found that she had went to a local bank and was going to open up a checking account. She had plans.
After her disappearance, the National Park Service and also the U.S. Forest Service was notified. They were looking for her, but she was never seen in any of the campgrounds.
Nor had they found any property such as clothing, personal belongings. They had not seen any trace of Rosanna. It had been a period of time after Rosanna went missing, so I reached out to the local news media to see if they would run another article. They willingly agreed to help out. So just within a few days after the article came out in the local Bryson City newspaper, I received a phone call from a lady who worked in a local downtown thrift store. And she told me, "This has haunted me. The person who I am sure and certain that was in my store was in fact Rosanna."
I do not think there's one doubt in my mind that I seen her. Even after all these years, I might get mixed up on a few things, but I know that I saw her.
The date that she observed Rosanna in her store was in fact the date that Rosanna went missing.
It sticks out in her mind for that day because it resembled one of her family members and actually thought that it was her when she came into the store. She also said that she was with an older male that was in his 60s. They had come into the store together.
The store clerk told me that the male appeared to be very guarded over Rosanna.
It was like he had her under his spell. She acted to me like that the man was in control and she should do what he told her to do.
The store clerk also advised me that the male individual stated that he was a preacher who often traveled from campground to campground preaching.
The description of the male was in his early to mid-60s. He was a white male, and she also felt like he was wearing a hairpiece.
This is the initial sketch drawn by the forensic sketch artist. There were some similarities to Gary Hilton.
Looking at that composite kind of makes me remember the photographs we got at the ATMs. Even though he was wearing a mask or a homemade mask, it was obviously him. And that's close. That's real close.
You got the same hairline, the same brow line, the same nose.
Also on the descriptors that the store clerk gave was that the gentleman that was in there appeared to be balding. Gary Hilton was also balding.
Do you think it's possible that Gary Hilton was the man that came into the thrift shop?
I not only think it's possible, I know he's the man that came in the thrift store. And I broke out in a sweat. I was that close to a murderer.
During the investigation, we were able to confirm Gary had been in our area the time of the disappearance. This area is full of hiking trails, campgrounds, areas that he frequented to where he could get control of his victims.
John Bryant was an elderly victim of Gary Hilton. The area to where Mr. Bryant's body was located in the Nantahala Forest is adjacent to Bryson City. There were just too many similarities. The North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation did determine that those links were credible.
So it was decided that we needed to conduct an interview with Gary Hilton.
This is about a lady by the name of Rosanna Miliani.
Okay, I know who you're talking about.
You look into his eyes, and you could tell that Satan was running his soul. On December 7th, 2005, Rosanna Miliani was in Bryson City, North Carolina, on a hiking trip. Since then, she has vanished. We have no idea where she's at. One of the angles that we looked at was, could Gary Hilton, the known serial killer, have anything to do with Rosanna's disappearance?
You heard about Gary Hilton and saw his picture. You thought that could be the guy?
Yeah, I did. Right off the bat, the first look, I have no doubt in my mind that this is the man that came into the thrift store.
After the sketch was completed, there were some similarities to Gary Hilton.
I do think the sketch will be the biggest clue that you have to find this lady.
To this day, the person that the store clerk reported seeing has never come forward. We've not had another person call and say, I think this is such and such. We have nothing.
Early on during the investigation of Gary Hilton, I was notified that there were 2 unknown DNA samples that were located in Gary Hilton's van.
Meredith's blood was there, John Bryant's blood was there, Cheryl Dunlap's blood was there, and there's other blood that's there that suggests that there's other victims.
DNA for Rosanna has been compared to other unknown DNA samples, and we've not received any positive connections between them. Even after all these years, we don't have any evidence linking anyone to the disappearance of Rosanna. It is a true mystery. One of the things that we had decided that needed to be done was myself and Special Agent Shannon Ash traveled down to the prison in Florida where Gary was being held, and interviews were conducted with him.
This is about a lady by the name of Rosanna Miliani.
Okay, I know who you're talking about.
There's a couple reasons that we want to talk to you about this.
Well, it fits my MO.
Other than just thinking that's one creepy SOB, he was very cooperative. But on the other hand, when you looked into his eyes, you could tell that Satan was running his soul. He talked about everything. He went over other victims, how he did it, why he did it, very graphic details.
One of the primary reasons I did these abductions was to rape the women. Even though I had fantasies of killing and raping women, the killing part was just to keep them getting caught.
Sure.
I did not like the killing. I usually didn't even like to fantasize about the killing. I would put that out of my mind.
When we started talking about our case, he had done his homework. He knew what we were coming down to talk to him about.
Rosanna, on December 7th, 2005, was seen with a male, a white male.
Yes. And she's
a composite, so that's the second reason we wanted to come. It's similar to you. Is that you?
Oh, no. Listen, well, let's cut to the chase right now. Okay, listen, the description I got was he was 50 to 60 years old. Okay, not only that, she was a hiker, I was a big-time hiker.
Yeah.
She disappeared during a hiking trip under some circumstances. My victims were all taken in the woods. Okay, it all fits together. But listen, it fits me, but it wasn't me. Okay?
That's one thing Gary Hilton will do. He will deny it until you can show him that you've got enough evidence that it's going is going to get him.
I've got to admit, I wasn't much of a serial killer. Okay, I should have had a long career, and I should have killed lots of people. And I just f***ed up. I committed. I mean, it's embarrassing. It is.
How many were there?
4. 2 Brians. There was Meredith Emerson and Cheryl Dunlap down here. That was it.
After the first interview, we felt like that we had enough of a rapport that we asked Gary if he would be willing to take a polygraph exam. He said he would. We then flew back to Florida with our polygraph examiner, and we got the results from the polygraph exam.
Rosanna Miliani traveled to Bryson City, North Carolina to do some hiking, and in the afternoon of that same day, Rosanna vanished into thin air. Was Rosanna's disappearance connected to the serial killer Gary Hilton?
Gary was more than willing to take the polygraph. He was asked point-blank questions about the disappearance. After it was over, the polygraph examiner noted that he could not find anything that would lead him to believe that Gary was not being honest. There was no deception noted during the polygraph.
Though Gary Hilton passed the polygraph test, they are not 100% accurate and are used just as a tool. It is possible he could have been deceptive.
We're not saying that Hilton is innocent or guilty, but there's no clear connection. I mean, it's a real mystery.
Gary Hilton is the only person to date that we have even suspected or thought of a person of interest. Right now, we do not have anything concrete that we could link Gary back to her disappearance. But with that being said, that does not mean that, if we get a call or we get a tip, that we're not going to jump right back on it. We want to know the truth. We want to know where she's at. I believe that Gary Hilton has some skeletons in his closet that's not been revealed yet.
There's someone out there that definitely knows what happened to Rosanna.
Living the way it is now without knowing, I think is a torture. It's very difficult. Every single minute, she's in my mind.
I'm 75 years old, and I don't like to die without knowing what happened to my daughter. I need to find out. I need to put a conclusion to that.
It has been a nightmare for Rosanna's family, not knowing what happened to their daughter.
I really plead anyone to help me up solve this problem. My daughter has been lost for so many years. The number that you have to call is 828-488-0159 at the Swan County Sheriff's Office.
Rosanna Miliani's disappearance remains a mystery. To this day, authorities still have not excluded the possibility that Gary Hilton may have been involved.
It is ordered and judged that you, Gary Michael Hilton, be sentenced to death for the murder of Cheryl Dunlap.
On February 21st, 2011, the jury unanimously recommended the death penalty for the murder of Cheryl Dunlap. I was thrilled that a woman could be the one that brought his end in some regard. Gary Michael Hilton is currently on death row at Union CI. We are still in the middle of an appeal, so no date has been set for him to be executed.
I look forward to learning the date of Gary Hilton's execution in Florida, and you better bet I'll be there.
It makes me angry. 2 years old, full of life.
Everyone just fell in love with her.
2-year-old Ariana missing under the most suspicious of circumstances.
It is very rare that you see cases like this.
Do you believe that Ariana is still alive?
Very vibrant, beautiful young child. Now it's just a search for Ariana.
This has remained an active investigation since the very first day.
Her mother, Nikki Fitz, found in a shallow grave.
This location is very interesting because it is right along a pedestrian path, which made it possibly easier for them to gain access to this location.
There is no way that she deserved what happened to her.
Somebody out there knows what happened, and we need them to come forward.
We continue to actively investigate this case. We will continue to investigate as long as it takes to find out what happened.
I'm Paul Holes. This is Real Life Nightmare.
The two words that come to mind most when describing Nicole is warm and trusting. She was born in Southern California, the middle of two sisters. She had a younger sister, older sister, very close with her mom, very involved in family activities.
We were always the closest when we were kids. I mean, we did everything together. My mom would actually often dress us the same, so people always thought we were twins.
She was involved in scouting and doing Girl Scouts, something that she did a lot with her mom.
Growing up, there was 3 of us girls and my mom, who we all grew up together, and Nikki was just 1 year older than I am.
Had a pretty rough childhood, and then her mom passed away of breast cancer at the age of 16. Certainly a pretty pivotal moment for her.
To describe Nikki, I would say probably just one of the most generous and sweetest people you could ever meet. Just thought of everyone before herself.
She was just so warm and welcoming. So yeah, we became friends quickly.
Nikki was a single mother of 2 children, and Nikki dedicated everything she did to taking care of her kids.
I would say that Ariana was a little spoiled by Nikki. Not overly spoiled, but I think Ariana kind of knew how to get her way, you know.
You know, it wasn't always easy. Being a single parent, but, she made it a priority and did absolutely whatever needed to be done for them.
Nicole certainly had some financial struggles, as many people do who live in the Bay Area, and for a time was living in a women's shelter in San Mateo County. But she was a single mother raising 2 girls.
Realistically, we all have struggles, and, living in an expensive city, it's tough, and she definitely struggled with that, but she fought through it. Claire and I had moved to Santa Cruz. Nikki started working at Best Buy after we had moved.
I first met Nicole when we worked at Best Buy, and over a period of time, Nicole and I became more and more friends, going out to lunch during our break times, during our lunch times, and pretty much just hanging out all the time soon after that. And one day after work, when I was going home, she followed with me, and I was taking a lift back home. And I asked where she was going. She said she didn't have anywhere to go, and that's when I found out that she didn't have anywhere to stay. She was homeless at the time.
A mother of 2, Nicole Fitz's older daughter was being taken care of by family.
Nicole's goal was to find a safe place for Ariana to live. She wanted to have a place for both her daughters so they could have that sort of upbringing that I think she always wanted for her girls.
But as Nicole struggled to get back on her feet, who was taking care of the younger daughter, Ariana? Ariana's father didn't have any involvement in her life.
With Ariana, Nicole had caretakers that were watching her. And obviously, Nicole's having to work in order to pay, in essence, for daycare while she's...
Yeah, she wants to get to a position where she can have her own place, and at the same time, she's trying to earn money to provide for the people who are looking after Ariana.
She had always been with the babysitters when she was working, so I thought, it was just something that she was still doing.
Unfortunately, I didn't know the babysitters by name. When Nikki would talk about, the people who were caring for Ariana, she would mostly just say the babysitters is how she referred to them when she would talk about them. We didn't talk every day. We talked a couple times a week, but we didn't talk every day. So, it wasn't unusual that I hadn't heard from Nikki in a couple of days. And I was driving, Claire and I were driving, and I got a text message from my oldest sister, and the message said, "Hey, is Nikki missing?" And I was like, "What? No, I just talked to her a couple days ago." I open up Facebook, and the first thing I see is a post from Nikki's best friend indicating that she hadn't been seen at work for a couple of days and hadn't been seen by anybody for a couple of days.
I received a phone call from a mutual friend and someone that we both worked with, and she called me and said Nicole had never came home, and I was like, "What do you mean? I was with Nicole and I dropped her off." "Well, what do you mean?" And she said she had left after she came home and just never returned.
I was actually driving, and I had to pull over immediately. Yeah.
Police were definitely contacted that night.
We want to speak to everyone who interacted with Nicole in the last hours and days leading up to her disappearance.
We looked through Nikki's social media as well as Nikki's Facebook to try to see who we could, connect with, maybe a coworker or someone in San Francisco who she associates with. While looking through Nikki's Facebook, we definitely saw something very unusual.
In San Francisco, a mother of two, Nicole Fitz, goes missing after work.
Nicole Fitz was 32 years old. She disappeared on April the 1st, 2016.
One of Nicole's last known locations was this Best Buy on Harrison Street in San Francisco, where she worked. Investigators coming to Best Buy and getting video surveillance of her movements through the store, as well as her leaving the store at the end of shift, would be something that would be highly scrutinized.
According to a crime bulletin from the San Francisco PD, Nicole Fitz received a mysterious call the day she vanished at approximately 9 p.m. She was lured out of her home to, quote, "go meet the babysitter."
I've never heard her kind of just take off in the middle of the night.
San Francisco PD has stated that Nicole took a minibus to go meet someone she knew. One day after Nicole Fitz disappears, Nicole's roommate receives a strange text message.
And the family, they were concerned because Nicole didn't know a Sam, and she definitely didn't have a car.
The supposed destination, Fresno, California, is almost 200 miles from San Francisco.
It was just really confusing to me. I didn't hear anything about her wanting to leave or going to leave for Fresno at any time.
While looking through Nikki's Facebook, we definitely saw something very unusual. It was a post that supposedly Nikki had created that read, "Going away with my 3-year-old, need this break." And, you know, that just didn't seem right to us at all.
The message was also posted on April 2nd, the day after Nicole Fitz went missing.
It was such a strange message anyway, like just such a strange, it just, you know, it didn't sit right.
Ariana was only 2.5 at the time, and, you know, this post at 3, and no parent is going to age their child. You know, break was spelled wrong. It was spelled like brakes on a car instead of the correct way, and Nikki was very good with grammar and spelling.
Those posts, in all likelihood, were put there by the offender. This is a form of staging, and any time an offender does staging, that means that they are likely thinking that they would naturally become a suspect. Investigatively, this is huge because depending on the device that the offender used and the information they can get from the social media company, the telephone companies, this might give insight as to whether this was something that was done from a computer, from Nicole's phone, from their own phone. And this can give location information that can be used to hunt them down.
We basically started profiling people, including ourselves, and just started with immediate family, our relationship to her, approximate last time we saw her, or last time we interacted with her.
We didn't know the people she associated with. We hadn't really met them.
The family starts taking a closer look at Ariana's caretakers, known as the babysitters.
She might have mentioned them by name at one point or another, but typically she referred to them as the babysitters, and that they were sisters. We knew the locations of where the babysitters lived, but we hadn't really had any interactions with them.
It was just shock to see that no one had heard from her for a couple days.
If Nikki had been missing, if they hadn't heard from Nikki about taking care of her child, I would assume that they would try to reach out to us.
It was probably about a 3-day search for us, and we had been in contact with multiple police departments. The 3 days that we were looking, we weren't sure if Nikki was with Ariana or not.
That question would be answered just a few days later with a shocking, significant discovery at this San Francisco park.
Today is 6 years.
6 years ago. 6 years. Nicole was last seen on the night of April 1st, 2016.
6 years of heartache and uncertainty.
Just fear, just complete fear. What could have happened, to my sister? My sister and I were in a coffee shop, and we get a call from a detective at the Hall of Justice in San Francisco, and I was very excited for that call because it felt like, yes, something's happening. Like we're really gonna find her. And so my sister and we go down to the Hall of Justice, and I have a one-on-one interview with one of the detectives there. And when we're done, he wants to. He tells my sister and I to go and take a little break. Then he calls us back in. And he says, "This is the hardest thing I have to tell you." and I don't let him finish because I know what he's going to tell me. April 8th, after 3 days of looking for Nikki, we were told that she was found dead.
At 10:30 a.m., Parks and Rec employees found Nicole's body at San Francisco's McLaren Park.
It was pretty much a blank after that. I remember just having my head down and just crying my eyes out. And my sister coming to hug me.
Shortly after I arrived, they informed me that Nikki was found. It was just the worst. It was just the worst.
Nicole was the type of person that would kind of do almost anything for you, and knowing that she was killed, it didn't make any sense. So I just was just sitting and thinking, what happened?
San Francisco police revealed Nicole Fitz was found still wearing her Best Buy shirt.
Was there any indication she was killed at the location where her body was found, or do you think that she was killed elsewhere?
So we're going to hold back on the cause of death, because there's some relevance there, as this is still a very active investigation.
Could you kind of explain from your perspective the reason why bits of information that might be useful for the public to know but is not being put out there?
I can certainly understand the public's frustration when law enforcement has to be intentionally vague or hold back aspects of the case. Our main goal is to find Ariana.
So I found out Ariana was missing basically when I found out that Nikki had been murdered.
My understanding is there had been some time between when Nicole last saw Ariana and when her body was found.
Anytime we work a missing persons case or a missing children's case, the timeline is critical. Due to some extraordinary circumstances, Nicole found herself living apart from Ariana in those last few months. Nicole was working diligently to have enough money, to have enough means that she could provide that safe and comfortable housing for both her daughters. In all of her efforts to do that, she was in regular communication with those who were looking after Ariana, but she did find manipulation and she did find obstruction in those efforts in the last months of her life.
What hasn't been revealed is the exact last time or the last person to see Ariana before her mother's death.
Now it's a search for Ariana, because if Nikki was the only one who was found, then where is Ariana?
In this case, we're pretty confident we searched that whole McLaren Park.
And you're confident that Ariana is not out there?
We are confident.
Part of any search of this type of terrain, I imagine, must have used dogs trained in order to detect if there's any human remains out there.
I can't talk to the specifics of it right now, but we did go out there multiple times, so it wasn't just the day she was found.
So why are the offenders choosing right here? Well, at this location, there is no street lights. So they would be doing this under the cover of darkness. They could have gone and disposed of Nicole's body, gotten back into the vehicle, and literally driven down this street on their escape. It would have just taken them a couple of minutes.
A crime bulletin by San Francisco's PD identifies the name of the babysitter.
Someone called me and said, I got somebody I need for you to talk to. They've been interviewed already. The police wants to interview them a second time. They need to talk to you. So I got that phone call, and that introduced me to Helena Martin.
2-year-old Ariana went missing under the most suspicious of circumstances in the San Francisco Bay Area in 2016. Her mother, Nikki Fitz, was found in a shallow grave in San Francisco's McLaren Park, but Ariana was gone.
I also want to make a plea to people out there to actually look at this as a single mother who was trying to do the right thing, was working full time, and is trying to manage her life, and she lost her life.
And we have to remember that Nicole had an older daughter who, for obvious reasons, for her safety, we're not going to mention. But since Ariana's disappearance, she's had to grow up without her baby sister.
I would do anything to find her. I want nothing more than to bring her home.
When it comes to April 1st, which was the last day that anyone saw Nicole, the last thing that she was doing was she was going to meet with the people who were looking after Ariana. So she told her roommate that that's where she was going to do. That was a pretty frequent aspect because Nicole at that point had been really working diligently to get Ariana back, and she was having some difficulty from the people who were looking after her. But on her last night, she was communicating with those individuals and was going to meet them.
It became pretty clear pretty quickly that there was a connection between someone taking Nikki's life and someone having Ariana.
So you have a homicide of Nicole, definitely SFPD jurisdiction, and then the missing girl case, 2-year-old Ariana, that's federal jurisdiction. Is it possible that these are two unrelated crimes?
No, we're confident that they are linked.
While we don't believe that Ariana was with Nicole at the time of her death, we do believe that Ariana's disappearance and Nicole's death are certainly related to each other.
So in all likelihood, there's probably another location related to this case that is unknown.
I think there's certainly other aspects, that are relevant to this case beyond just the location of where Nicole's body was found.
They were able to determine that Helena Martin had been a babysitter for Ariana. And somehow they were able to find her and interview her. After the interview, they wanted to interview her again, and Helena contacted me. I know that the investigation reached out to her husband. He never babysat the baby. He never looked after her. He never cared for her. He just lived in the same home with Helena. But as far as I can remember, Helena was the only one that was responsible for babysitting the baby.
People I hadn't heard from in 10 years jumped on to express some sort of concern. Here are the people who care for Ariana daily and nothing.
We had picked Nikki and Ariana up from the babysitters in Oakland, who we later learned were Helena and Devin Martin.
What I remember is after she did the interview, somehow her name got leaked to the media. So it went from Helena was the last person to see the baby to Helena is a suspect. So she got an awful lot of attention. I believe the FBI came over with a search warrant. It went from, I just want to talk about when was the last time you babysat this kid, to all of these searches. And that's when it became clear to her that this wasn't going to be a regular interview without divulging any attorney-client privilege. I can say that I know that they searched her home, they searched her phone, they searched her storage area, they took DNA from her car, every possible thing that you could do to see if there's some evidence of some type of connection to this was done, and there wasn't anything there. From everything that I remember, there wasn't a family relationship. They weren't related. They didn't go to school together. They didn't have a social relationship. It was purely, you drop the baby off, you pay me, you pick the baby up. So there wasn't any extended relationship. And that was, I think, reflected in the search of the phone. And there weren't phone calls to Nicole. They didn't have any casual relationship. It was purely babysitting.
This information underscores that investigators are leaving no stone unturned.
Both the FBI and the San Francisco Police Department believe that there are people out there with knowledge, whether direct or indirect, that is relevant to this case.
I'm standing at the very spot where Nicole's body was found in a fetal position in a shallow grave that was just 3 feet wide.
This was actually a neighborhood park, and this was a playground, Lewis Sutter Playground. It's like in a flat area adjacent to homes in the area.
And so this is unusual to be finding a victim of a homicide at this particular location.
Yes.
Nicole's body was found really within just a few dozen feet of a primary road next to the park. Her body was placed behind a barrier of vegetation. This was easy access to the offender. They wanted to position Nicole's body so there wouldn't be visibility from the street.
In that grave was Nicole Fitz, and there was plywood over the grave with a marking on it.
It may have been something used to help carry the body, and if it had been like a stretcher, then it required 2 people to carry Nicole's body on the piece of plywood. It also is something that is being used to cover her body inside this shallow grave, to hide her, to delay discovery.
The piece of plywood is an interesting bit of evidence because it has a unique symbol on that piece of plywood that I think somebody would recognize having seen it.
It is absolutely significant because it provides a unique characteristic to this piece of plywood that somebody in the public might recognize. They may have seen this piece of plywood at the offender's house, in the bed of the offender's pickup if he's driving a pickup, or someplace else. So it is hugely significant to pay attention to the plywood and the symbol that is on the plywood.
Someone must know something, and we need our community to rally around this family. And if someone knows something, they need to say something.
The FBI also expands the investigation to Nevada.
So we're certainly interested in the Bay Area. Nicole and her family spent significant time here. But we know that there are individuals with information, potential witnesses who have since moved out of the Bay Area. So between the Bay Area, the entire state of California, as well as some who have relocated to Nevada. Not only have we been able to glean more from the evidence that was originally collected in the case, but in the last 6 years, we've also come up with new evidence related to Nicole's murder and Ariana's disappearance.
It sounds like to me that whoever is involved in this case should be getting nervous.
I would certainly hope so.
Young mother Nicole Fitz was found brutally murdered and buried in a park. And police are desperately searching for her missing 2-year-old daughter, Ariana.
We've been thinking about this every day. Every day we work on Nicole, we work on Ariana, but we don't want their memories to fade into the background as time passes. Our main goal is twofold. We want to find those responsible for Nicole's death, and more than anything else, we want to find Ariana.
She's just so smart and so sweet and just the cutest, bubbly.
Ariana Fitz's case landed on our radar from her aunt Tess. She contacted the organization because she ran into a number of barriers in trying to find her toddler niece.
The thing that Nikki would want is to know that her daughter is home with her family. So that gives me the strength to do whatever is necessary in the search for Ariana.
When Tess reached out to us, we, wanted Ariana to be a household name too.
I do trust that that the detectives and people investigating, I do trust that they are telling me what they can.
I haven't heard from an investigator. She hasn't heard from an investigator for some time now. I think there was some evidence that she cared for the baby, babysat the baby, last in January or early February of 2016. And she told me, as much as it's worth someone telling you something, that she had nothing to do with the death of Nicole Fitz and the missing daughter.
There are other items of evidence, and we're forensically looking at every single item, but sometimes we also need that dynamic, that relationship with the item and how it fits into the whole crime.
According to family and friends, in the months before she went missing, Nicole Fitz was in a toxic living situation. Things turned sour with the female roommate who let Nicole rent a room.
She was kind of telling me the situation that was going on with Limasani, and just like the complete disrespect that she was having for her, the way she was treating her. And, I told Nikki, I was like, just say the word and, we'll come and get you and Ariana.
And we went to Limasani's so that Nikki could pick up her things and Ariana's things, because Nikki was done. She wanted to move out. She wanted to get out, and she came home to Santa Cruz with us that day. But Limasani refused. She refused to give Nikki any of her things. The most we got was Ariana's car seat. We didn't get Ariana's care package, like her diapers. We didn't get any snacks that she might have had. We didn't get any of Ariana's toys.
When I did learn that Ariana's babysitters were relatives of Limasani, I did have some concern about that. I didn't think it was a good idea.
From an evidentiary standpoint, there have been tremendous advances in the fields of forensic evidence, in the fields of genetics. Additionally, our capabilities in terms of exploiting digital evidence have grown leaps and bounds.
Extremely unlikely that I would ever allow her to be interviewed again. I think it's also unlikely that they're ever going to find anything that attaches her to the case.
Not only have we been able to glean more from the evidence that was originally collected in the case, but in the last 6 years, we've also come up with new evidence related to Nicole's murder and Ariana's disappearance. I'm going to be a little bit vague as to what that evidence indicates and what it is, but it is certainly providing a more complete picture of what happened.
There is potentially a little girl, Ariana, that is out there and is with somebody. So now an outreach to the public is so critical to have people looking for Ariana.
Do you believe that Ariana is still alive?
A mom is found murdered and buried in a park in San Francisco, and a desperate search for her missing 2-year-old daughter is underway.
We continue to hold on to hope that someone will come forward with information as to what happened to Ariana and can help bring her home alive and safe, and we can get answers as to who murdered her mother.
Nicole's body was found just within a few dozen feet of a prime road right next to McLaren Park. All they had to do was park on this road and bring her body to this location. This tells me they had some familiarity.
This investigation is not going to end. We are not going away. We're going to keep at this.
It has been almost 60 years, and we continue to search for Ariana.
We're always looking at forensics. We're looking at all leads that might help solve the case. But many times there's always that one person that can help us and give us some information on what was Nicole doing that morning. Who did she talk to?
Do you believe that Ariana is still alive?
I hope Ariana's still alive. We're going to proceed in this case that we have a missing child, and we're going to do everything we can to find a missing child, and that's not going to change until evidence proves elsewise.
Most likely, nothing's probably going to happen until they get another lead, until someone comes in and provides some information or something checks out that didn't check out before.
We're asking every person who saw or interacted with Nicole on that Friday or the days before to think back to that time. Try to remember who you were with, where you were, what you were doing, who you talked to, talked about, what you saw, what Nicole said, what she did.
Right now we're looking for an 8-year-old girl.
Yeah, which, I mean, obviously her physical appearance would have changed dramatically.
Her physical appearance has certainly changed. We've worked with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They have experts who do an age progression to come up with images of what we believe Ariana looks like today.
It's so important for us to just share this within the community.
Young children who go missing change their physical characteristics very quickly, not looking like the photos that were last taken of them. Age progression sketches are often the best guess of what they look like today when people are now looking for them.
The FBI and the San Francisco Police Department are working with NCMEC to put up billboards with photos and age progression images of Ariana throughout California and Nevada.
She's no longer a toddler, so her features have changed, but we want people to take a closer look at her picture and see if it resonates with you, and you may have seen her.
Eager to solve the case, the San Francisco PD has increased the reward from the original $100,000.
The reason for the reward is to help us make sure that we do look at some other leads in addition to all the forensic leads and everything else that we will follow on a homicide investigation and a missing persons investigation.
And it sounds like to me, SFPD, that there's no expenses spared on this case at all.
No, not at all.
So while we've been waiting for certain individuals to come forward to talk to us about what they know, the wheels in the background in the fields of evidence and tech have been spinning dramatically.
In this case, if investigators are confident that they have offender DNA, there's been revolutionary advances within the DNA discipline. The use of genetic genealogy could possibly identify the offender, even though that person is not in a criminal DNA database.
With Ariana, being so young, she may not even know, that she was abducted or kidnapped, and you wonder even if she has memories of her mother, because she spent quite a bit of time in her, formative years with her babysitter.
If anybody out there in the public sees somebody they know that all of a sudden showed up with a child, maybe claiming this young girl was adopted, or went off and came back, well, I got pregnant and now I have this young child, please pay attention. If that child looks like Ariana, call that information in to the San Francisco police.
We need the community to step up and to help us find Ariana. Share her profile. Share it within your network. Let's make her a household name.
I want the people who did this know this. The FBI and the SFPD are not stopping. They're going to keep on looking until they have someone in custody.
We are not going to stop asking the questions. And we're going to keep at this until we find Ariana and until we find those responsible for Nicole's death.
I just want to find Ariana. I want to hear her voice again. I think about them both every day. In my mind, I still hear Nikki. In my mind, I still hear Ariana. It's incredibly difficult to keep going every day, and we just need to be reunited with Ariana.
No way I thought that I was going to be told that I would never see my sister again. It makes me angry. I think it's pretty outrageous that 5 years later, the people who killed my sister aren't behind bars.
I'm Paul Holes for Real Life Nightmare. Thanks for watching.
Moutain.